Do I need a trust if I'm about to be remarried? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. Today, let's look at a question I get a lot of times when people are getting ready to be remarried. You've been married once before, for whatever reason that marriage is over, and what are the estate planning implications, especially using a trust, if you're about to get remarried? So as I said in the intro, this question comes up quite a bit when I have clients who are coming in and they're getting married for a second or third or however many times they're getting married. And the question becomes, what do we do from an estate planning perspective if I'm getting remarried and I'm not necessarily sure what my new spouse will be inheriting versus what my old family will be inheriting? So there's three different scenarios we can take a look at. Scenario number one, you're getting remarried, but nobody has any children. So in this situation, if nobody has any children, you can do a trust for you and your new spouse, but it may not be as necessary as it's going to be in the other two categories. So if there's nobody who's a child or there's no grandchildren to inherit, then you have less of a need to have a trust created if you're just both getting married for a second time or one of you for a second time and there's been no children, there's no other people who need to inherit from prior relationships. Frankly, this is the same approach we look at whenever anybody comes into the office and says, do I need a trust? So if you watch videos online, if you speak to attorneys, most of them will tell you that you need a trust. Listen to the pundits online, read the books. Everyone says you need a trust. And I'm actually going to be here to tell you, you don't always need a trust. It can many times be a good idea. However, depending where you live, depending upon the probate court, depending upon the laws of your state, you may or may not actually need a trust. So before you just jump head in and go to any attorney who tells you definitely need a trust, make sure you take a step back and think about what are they telling you and what are the reasons for the trust. If you and your soon-to-be spouse don't own any property together and you just have your basic W-2 income and a few retirement accounts and a life insurance policy, you may not need to spend that extra money on a trust. Down the road, if you have children, that trust may be a good idea, but at this point, you may not need a trust. Scenario number two, one of you has children, but the other one does not. This is a very common situation that I run into with clients, and that is someone has children from a prior marriage, and now they're getting remarried, and they are curious about what's going to happen from an estate planning standpoint for their assets after they get married. So if you don't do a trust, when you get remarried, your spouse is entitled to certain inheritances under law if you were to die. We can use a will and we can use a trust to make what they inherit clearer. And the reason that can be very important is because you may have children from a prior relationship who think they are inheriting all of your inheritance, they're getting all of your assets, and then they get a rude awakening to find that actually your new spouse is entitled to some, if not almost all, of your estate. If you're in a state that has what we call the elective share, what that means is that a spouse who is not entitled to inherit under your will, or if you've cut them out of other assets, can actually go to court and challenge the distribution and claim a percentage. Now, this is where it's important to talk to an attorney in your state to understand what the elective share says in your state and to make sure you know, because usually it's a different percentage. So it'd be if you've been married for so long, you get 3%, 6%, 8%. In other states, it doesn't matter how long you were married, but you have a legal right for a certain amount of money just by being married. So you need to understand what we call the elective share, and actually there's other videos on my channel, for example, talking about Rick Ocasek and his divorce and how the elective share factored in to his estate after he died. So if one of you has children from a prior marriage, it's going to be important to understand the elective share, and that's where a trust can be very helpful because we can move assets into the trust and make sure we preserve certain things for your children. Let's say you had a family cabin that you want to make sure stayed in the family and goes to your children so your grandkids can continue to use it, and your children don't necessarily want to share it with your new wife. Maybe they're not so excited about who you're marrying. We can use a trust to make sure we're protecting that family legacy. Third scenario. We have the same blended family, but both of you have children from a prior relationship. So this is actually a pretty common situation that people will come to me. They have two sets of children. Let's say you have two sons, your soon-to-be spouse has two daughters. So now we're getting married and we have 4 children. So if we don't do any estate planning when one of you dies, then the other inherits all of the assets, and then when that person dies, their children get it. So let's say you die first. Let's say you're the husband, you die first, and your wife has 2 sons. So you die first, and now your wife has inherited through your estate. And then once she dies, her 2 sons actually inherit everything, your estate and her estate. And your daughters from your prior relationship aren't necessarily going to get anything from this. This is the prime concern that people have when they come to my office about a remarriage and having children. So what we can do with this trust is make sure that we are leaving legacies for both sets of children. So both the boys and the girls, both from each marriage or each prior relationship, we've now blended this family together. The trust is a really important tool to make sure we're carving out an inheritance for both sides of the family. If you don't have any estate planning, no will, no trust, no nothing, then really it's a game of who can outlive the other. Whoever lives longer, they and their children will get more from the estate than whoever dies first and their children. So hopefully you can see the importance of a trust if you're getting remarried, but it really depends upon the scenario. Again, if you have no children, maybe you're young and this is a second marriage and you haven't had kids yet and you don't have a lot of assets, then maybe that trust is not the right vehicle for you in an estate plan, but you may still want to at least have a will. If one of you have children, we've gotten into that point where we want to make sure that a trust is considered, especially if we have assets we want to protect for those children in case their parent is the first one to die. And then in scenario 3, if everybody has children from a prior relationship, it will almost always be our recommendation that we create a trust so we can make sure we protect your various inheritances for both sets of children so nobody's left out in the cold. So hopefully you can see if you're getting ready to remarry, figure out which scenario you fall into. If you have more questions or you'd like to set up a legal strategy session, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. On the main page is a red legal strategy session button. If you click that, you'll be taken to my scheduling page where we can pick a time that's convenient for both of us to speak. It's a 15 or 20 minute legal strategy session, and we could talk about the questions you have and what are the best next steps for you. If you like this video, you can hit the like or the thumbs up button below. You can always subscribe on YouTube or by going to Ayers Law TV. And so if you're considering that trust, make sure you know which scenario you fall into and make sure you make that correct choice for you and your family when we're putting your estate plan together.